I never thought one simple moment could change everything. It was just another long day on the job, standing by the entrance, tired and worn out from dealing with endless complaints and rules. I had learned to keep my distance, to be firm, to stay cold when needed. That's what being a security guard meant. No distractions, no softness. Then I saw him. A homeless man, sitting on the cold steps outside the building. His clothes were ragged, his face covered in dirt, eyes tired and lost. He wasn't making any trouble, just lingering there like he belonged nowhere. But the moment he looked up, something about him stopped me. It was in his eyes, a quiet sadness that made me pause. "Sir, you need to move along. This area is private property," I said, my voice sharp and steady, hiding the exhaustion beneath. He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, I won't bother you." I expected him to shuffle away like the others, but he didn't. He stayed just a little longer, looking down at his hands like he was holding on to something invisible. I felt a strange pull, a tiny crack in my usual armor. There was more to this man than the surface showed. I could feel it, deep inside. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing by sending him away. Little did I know, that moment would change everything, not just for him, but for me. That day had been brutal. From the moment I clocked in, it felt like everything was against me. Complaints about loud music from the nearby shops, people trying to sneak in without permission, neighbors arguing over parking spots. The same tired stories, the same endless problems. My feet ached, my voice was strained from repeating the same warnings, and my patience was hanging by a thread. I wasn't in the mood for distractions. I had rules to enforce, lines to draw. This was my job, my responsibility. And so when I saw him sitting there, this homeless man just outside the gate, I felt nothing but annoyance. He looked worn down by life. His clothes were dirty and torn, the kind of ragged that spoke of months, maybe years on the streets. His hair was messy, unwashed, and I caught a faint, sharp smell, maybe alcohol, maybe just sweat and hardship mixed together. It was the kind of smell that made people step back. I thought, here we go again. Another vagrant, just causing problems. I walked over to him, firm and no nonsense. "You can't stay here," I told him. "This is private property." He didn't argue or curse me out like I expected some people to do. He just looked up at me with tired eyes, and in his voice there was nothing but quiet acceptance. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'll leave." There was no fight in him, no resistance, just a man who looked broken, like life had taken all he had and left him empty. I wanted to turn away, to walk back inside and forget about him, and I almost did. But something about his face, it stayed with me. His eyes, they weren't angry or mean, they were just so tired, so sad, like he had seen too much pain for one lifetime. I caught myself staring longer than I should have, feeling a flicker of something I didn't expect, pity, or maybe guilt. I shook my head and told myself, no, you can't get involved. This is the job. But the truth was, the image of that quiet, broken man lingered in my mind, long after I'd walked away. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to his story than I could see. I kept thinking about him all day, the way he didn't fight back, the way his eyes told a story I couldn't ignore. I was supposed to be tough, to stay distant, but curiosity gnawed at me. Why was he really out here? What had happened to him? After my shift ended, I found myself walking back toward the steps where he usually sat. The evening was quiet, the world around us fading into shadows. When I saw him, he looked smaller, somehow, more fragile. I hesitated, then gathered my courage. "Hey," I said softly. "Can I ask, why are you out here? What happened?" He looked up surprised at first, then his eyes dropped. For a long moment, he said nothing. I waited, unsure if I should press. Finally he spoke, his voice rough and low. "It's a long story." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. He took a shaky breath, and began. "I used to have a good life. A wife, 2 kids, a steady job at a factory, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I worked hard, made plans for the future, thought I was doing all right. His eyes glazed over like the memories were painful, but then, he paused, swallowing hard. Then everything changed. He told me about the illness that hit his wife, how it drained their savings, their hope. The bills piled up, and his job disappeared when the factory closed down. He looked for work everywhere, but with no luck. I tried to hold it together, he said. For them. But after a while, my wife, she left, said she couldn't handle it anymore. Took the kids with her. He looked away, voice cracking. I lost my family, my home, my purpose. I ended up on the streets because there was nowhere else to go. I couldn't stop the lump in my throat. My heart ached for him in a way I hadn't expected. This wasn't just some random man begging for a handout. This was someone who had been broken by life's cruel turns. For the first time I saw him not as a problem to solve, or a rule to enforce, but as a person. A person who had loved, lost, and been left behind. Tears stung my eyes, and suddenly, I felt ashamed. How quick I had been to judge, to push him away without knowing a thing. I wanted to say something to make it better, but no words came, so I just sat beside him quietly, letting the silence speak for both of us. That night, everything I thought I knew about homelessness, about people on the streets, changed. And I realized the truth: sometimes, the hardest stories are the ones we never hear. After that night, I found myself unable to forget him, the man with the quiet sadness and the story I never expected. The next day, instead of avoiding him like I usually would, I brought a small bag of food and a bottle of water. I wasn't sure what I was doing, or if it was even welcome, but something inside me pushed me forward. When I handed him the food, he looked up at me with a soft, grateful smile. "Thank you," he said simply. That one word felt heavy with meaning. From then on, I made a point to check on him whenever I could. At first our conversations were short and cautious, but slowly the walls came down. He told me about his life before the streets, not just the losses, but the dreams he had once. He said he used to be a teacher, a man who loved helping kids learn and grow. His voice lit up a little when he talked about his students, the ones who made him proud. It wasn't just a job, he said, it was a purpose. Hearing that, I couldn't help but think about my own life. I wasn't a teacher or anything grand like that. I was just a security guard, an invisible presence at the edge of people's lives, enforcing rules without really connecting. But his story made me realize how easy it is to judge someone, when you only see the surface. How quick I had been to write him off without knowing the battles he'd fought. I thought about my own struggles, the years I spent working multiple jobs just to support my family, the nights I cried alone when things felt impossible, the times I felt invisible too. I understood what it meant to feel lost, to fight to hold on to hope. One afternoon, he showed me a small notebook filled with sketches. I hadn't expected him to have something like that. "I used to draw," he explained shyly. "It helped me escape. But now, I don't have the supplies or the place to keep going." I could see the pain in his eyes when he said that, the loss of something beautiful buried beneath hardship. As our conversations deepened, I began to see him not as the homeless man, but as a person with dreams, regrets, and hopes, just like anyone else. There were days when he was quiet, withdrawn, and I worried he might disappear. Other days, he laughed softly at my jokes, or shared memories that made me smile. Our friendship felt fragile, yet powerful, a small light in two lives that had been through darkness. But I kept wondering, could this connection really change anything? Could I make a difference? Could he? Sometimes, I caught myself staring at him, and feeling both hope and fear. Hope that people like him could find a way back. Fear that life might crush him again. Still, every visit, every shared meal, every story told felt like a step forward, for both of us. Because in breaking down the stereotypes, I found pieces of myself I had almost forgotten, and in him, I saw a chance to rewrite not just his story, but mine too. One afternoon, everything changed. I found him slumped against the wall, his face pale and sweat glistening on his forehead. He was breathing hard, struggling to sit up. Panic hit me like a wave. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I could see fear in his eyes, a fear I hadn't noticed before. Without thinking, I called for help, and stayed by his side, rubbing his back, trying to keep him calm. I realized how fragile he really was, how close to the edge he'd been all along. But just as we were waiting for the ambulance, a group of people approached. Some were angry, others suspicious. One man shouted, accusing him of causing trouble, blaming him for things he didn't do. Before I could stop them, police arrived. They didn't wait to hear his side, they assumed the worst. I saw the man's face twist in confusion and fear, as they tried to cuff him. I couldn't stand by and watch. I stepped in, explaining who he was, what was happening, trying to defend him. But it put my job at risk. My supervisor warned me later that I'd crossed a line. Still, I didn't care. I knew this man was more than a problem to be removed. He was someone who needed help, and I was the only one standing up for him. Thankfully, the ambulance arrived, and he was taken to the hospital. The doctors said he had a severe infection, something that could have been deadly if left untreated. News of what happened spread through the community. To my surprise, some neighbors reached out, offering clothes, food, and support. A local charity also stepped in, promising to help him get back on his feet. I watched all of this with mixed feelings, relief that he was finally getting help, but also a deep sadness, knowing how close he'd come to losing everything for good. That crisis showed me just how thin the line was between survival and tragedy, and how important it was for someone to care, to act, even when it wasn't easy. After the hospital stay, things slowly began to change for him. The local charity I mentioned stepped in and found him a small warm shelter, not a palace, but a safe place to sleep and heal. He started getting regular meals and medical care. For the first time in months, maybe years, he didn't have to worry about where he would sleep, or if he'd survive the night. One day, a job counselor came to the shelter. She saw his quiet determination, and offered to help him find work. It wasn't an easy road. He had to rebuild trust, health, and skills that had been buried for too long. But he was ready to try. Watching this transformation filled me with a mix of relief and hope. I still saw the tiredness in his eyes, the scars life had left behind, but I also saw a flicker of something new, something like a second chance. For me, this wasn't just about helping one man, it was a reminder of how kindness, even small acts, can change lives. How stepping outside your comfort zone to listen, to care, can break down walls stronger than we realize. But I also know this isn't the end, not for him, and not for me. He has a long journey ahead, learning to trust again, to believe in himself, and I still have to face my own fears, my own judgments, that I didn't even realize I held. This story, our story, is a work in progress. It's messy, imperfect, and real, and maybe that's the point, that no matter how lost someone seems, there's always hope. There's always a chance to begin again. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it reminded you that there's always more to a person than what we see on the surface. Every face you pass by, every person you might judge quickly, carries a story, a life full of struggles, hopes, and dreams. It's easy to make assumptions, to turn away, but sometimes, all it takes is a moment of kindness, a little patience, or just listening to change everything. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, and share it with others. Your support helps spread awareness, and reminds us all to be a little more compassionate in a world that can be so harsh. Leave a comment below. Have you ever had a moment like this? A time when you looked beyond the surface, and found a story worth hearing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that open our eyes and hearts. Together we can make kindness contagious. Thank you for being here.